The Emperor is dead. When Horus killed him, he just proved what we always feared. Gods bleed, and ours rotted first. His body lies broken upon the golden dais, his once radiant light extinguished beneath Horus's claw. The throne room, once the heart of mankind's hope, is nothing but ash and echo. The Astronomican guttered out moments after the Warmaster's mace split the Emperor's skull, and across the void, the stars began to die. I was there, not as a hero, not as a custodian or primarch, but as a lowly Vox officer of the Imperial palace. My duty was to transmit coordinates to dying fleets, and to record the last screams of a civilization collapsing under its own faith. When Horus struck the final blow, I felt it, not through sight or sound, but as a shudder through the warp itself, a sound like glass breaking across the soul. And then came the silence, the kind that devours worlds. Terra burned. The sky was a canvas of auroras and ash, alive with warp lightning that painted the broken spires of the Imperial palace in sickly hues. The Warmaster's fleet hung above us, black shapes blotting out the sun, their hulls crowned with runes that pulsed with the rhythm of daemons whispering. Horus stood at the pinnacle of the ruined throne, blood still dripping from his talon, his armor alive with serpentine veins of chaos fire. He looked down at the world he had conquered and smiled like a god who finally understood his own cruelty. That was the moment faith ended. The ecclesiarchs would later call it the fall of light, but we didn't need a name. We lived it. The custodes died to the last. Rogel Dawn never returned from the walls. Guilliman's fleet vanished in the storms that tore open the warp. And Horus did not ascend alone. The gods of chaos stepped forward from the Imperium, their laughter spilling into reality, like plague through an open wound. They crowned him not as emperor, but as vessel, their champion, their bridge between mortal and warp. The Warmaster's mortal flesh cracked apart, revealing the god beneath, a fusion of man, daemon, and memory. The throne rebuilt itself around him, but not from gold. Flesh and iron twined together, pulsating, breathing. A throne alive, and on it sat not humanity's savior, but its corrupter. We thought the galaxy would end that day. It didn't. Ending would have been mercy. Terror became the eye. The warp blood into real space, and the distinction between the two began to rot. Oceans boiled into black sludge. The hives split open like carcasses, spilling billions into the streets where they fused into one another, flesh merging, screaming, evolving. The scent of decay became the air itself, and the sky burned green for 100 years. The surviving tech, priests of Mars, sent a single message before the planet disappeared behind warp storms. The Omnissiah has been devoured. After that, the Mechanicum was silent. The Forge worlds followed one by one, their machine, spirits screaming through the noosphere before being consumed by daemonic code that rewrote logic itself into prayer. And yet, we survived, I survived, we, the remnants of the Astra Militarum. A few thousand souls, hid beneath the palace in what used to be a manufactorum sublevel. The power still hummed from dying generators. We scavenged rations, weapons, and air filters from the corpses of Scutari. For a while, we believed we could rebuild. That belief didn't last long. The first of the warp storms rolled across the planet like a living thing, and with it came voices. Not in the air, not through comms, inside our skulls, soft, curious voices that called us by name. Some answered, some prayed, some screamed, none stayed sane. The soldiers who called themselves faithful began carving Imperial aquilers into their own skin to keep the whispers out. The heretics didn't bother resisting. They started smiling. Every night I would hear them whispering in the dark, not daemons. Not exactly. These were the voices of what was left of humanity, stretched thin across the warp, every death feeding the gods. I remember one voice in particular. A child asking if her mother would wake up soon. That voice still follows me even now. Above us, Horus's empire began to take shape. The New Imperium, they called it, a dominion of chaos stretching across the stars. The legions returned from the edges of the galaxy, no longer bound by loyalty or reason. Angron's world eaters became the architects of conquest, carving entire sectors into pits of blood. Mortarion spread his pestilence from Sol to the eastern fringe, his fleets trailing clouds of disease that turned void ships into floating hives of rot. Fulgrim crafted temples from living flesh, while Perturabo built fortresses that breathed. The Imperium didn't fall in one day, it decayed. Systems broke away, declaring independence or begging the gods for favor. But there was no independence anymore. There was only worship, and every prayer fed the same dark throne. Horus's laughter echoed across the void, carried by the warp itself, until it was impossible to tell whether it came from the stars or from within your own mind. And yet, rumors began to spread among the survivors. Whispers that the Emperor's soul hadn't vanished entirely, that somewhere within the warp, beyond the eye's edge, he lingered, shattered, bound, but unbroken. A flicker of light in the eternal storm. The faithful clung to it like drowning men to driftwood. I wanted to believe. I still did. But then I saw what was waiting above Terra. The sky split open, a vast wound in reality itself, bleeding light and shadow in equal measure. And from that wound came a sound like a heartbeat, slow and steady. The galaxy itself was alive, and its pulse was chaos. I remember the first time I looked up and realized that what hung above us wasn't a sky at all anymore. It was an eye, enormous, watching, unblinking, and I understood, with the clarity only madness brings, that it wasn't the warp bleeding into Terra. It was Terra bleeding into the warp. That was the night we lost hope. And that's when he found us. It started with the sound of boots. Not the hollow echo of scavengers, but the steady, disciplined rhythm of soldiers. We froze, lasguns raised, breath caught in recycled air thick with dust and despair. There hadn't been organized movement on Terra for months. Anything still marching in formation was either a miracle or a nightmare. The first figure that appeared through the dark was unmistakable. Armor scorched, sigils half scraped away. Visor cracked but still burning faintly gold beneath the grime. The Aquila had been defaced, but not destroyed. It had been painted over with something else, something older. A jagged 8-pointed star. He called himself Captain Luther of the Lunar Wolves. Once, that name would have brought pride. Now it brought only dread. The Lunar Wolves no longer existed. They were the sons of Horus, and their loyalty had rotted with their Primarch's soul. He raised his bolter and smiled. A human smile, tired and cruel all at once. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. We didn't move, didn't speak. Even now, I remember how the air seemed to hum around him. Reality bending just slightly, like the world was struggling to reject his presence. His armor whispered, not from motion, but from the things crawling inside the seams. The warp had marked him. He didn't fire. Instead, he gestured toward the corridor behind him, where more figures emerged, 20 in total. Some wore the same green-gray armor. Others bore markings from legions that had once been enemies. Word-bearers, Death Guard, even a single World Eater with his helm fused to his skull. Chaos united what the Emperor never could. "Come with us," Luther said. "Your Emperor is gone, but the Warmaster offers mercy. Mercy." The word hung in the air like a toxin. No one believed it, but we followed anyway, because what else was there? To refuse would mean death. To accept meant something worse. But at least it was life. They led us through the ruins of the palace, through chambers I'd once known by name, the Hall of the Thousand Victories, the Librarium vaults, all gone, melted, twisted, pulsing with unnatural life. I saw statues of the Emperor weep blood. I saw a custodian's armor, half melted into a wall of flesh. still whispering oaths through a vox that no longer had power. And then we reached the surface. I had thought the underground was horror enough. I was wrong. Terra was no longer a planet, it was a carcass. The oceans were gone, boiled into vapor. The land was cracked open like an autopsied corpse, its guts. Cities, cathedrals, manufacturer, spilling into yawning fissures. The air shimmered with heat and warp energy, colors shifting in patterns the human eye wasn't made to see. And above it all, Horus's palace, his citadel, rose from the ruins like a tumor of brass and black stone. Massive spires twisted upward, connected by bridges of molten iron and veins of glowing warp stuff. The air itself screamed near it, as if the planet resented its weight. That's where they took us. We marched beneath gates carved from the bones of titans. Daemons clung to the walls, whispering prayers that bled through the stone. Inside, light had no meaning. It was not bright or dark, only alive. The corridors pulsed with every heartbeat, as if the citadel itself was breathing. We were herded into a grand hall lined with broken banners. Once the symbols of the Great Crusade, I recognized them from data slates I'd studied during my service. Ultramar, white scars, blood angels. Now each was stitched over with symbols of chaos, their colors inverted, their meaning devoured. At the end of the hall stood a throne of flesh and iron, and on it sat him, Horus. I don't know how to describe what he'd become. His armor was alive, a fusion of steel and muscle, twitching with veins of warp fire. His face was both divine and monstrous, every feature a contradiction. One eye glowed with molten gold, the other was a pit of shadow so deep it seemed to swallow thought. When he spoke, the sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, vibrating through bone and memory alike. "Welcome, children of a dead god," he said. "You have lived through the death of truth. Now you will learn what freedom feels like." A soldier beside me screamed that Horus was a liar, that the Emperor would return. The Warmaster didn't even look at him. The man began to melt where he stood, his flesh turning liquid, his armor fusing to his bones. In seconds, he was a puddle steaming on the obsidian floor. Horus smiled, not cruelly, but like a teacher amused by a foolish question. He looked at me next. His gaze burned like radiation. "You were there when I killed him," he said softly. "You felt it." I nodded. I didn't know why. Maybe because lying felt pointless in front of a god. "Then you understand," Horus said. "He wasn't life. He was stagnation. The galaxy was never meant to kneel." He extended his clawed hand. "Join me, little mortal. See what comes after death." I didn't take it. I couldn't. He laughed, a sound like collapsing suns. "You will," he said. "You all will, because there is nowhere else to go." That was the truth. The galaxy no longer had direction. The Astronomican was gone. Warp storms cut the stars apart like infected wounds. Fleets vanished. Worlds lost contact. Without the Emperor's light, humanity was blind, and the only voice left guiding them belonged to Horus. He called it the rebirth. But it wasn't rebirth. It was infection. The Chaos Imperium began that day, and I watched it grow. I saw cults rise on every surviving world, chanting Horus's name as gospel. I saw space marines kneel before daemons and call them brothers. I saw titans rebuilt as walking temples, powered not by plasma but by bound warp entities. The galaxy became a cathedral of madness, and I, just one mortal soul, was trapped inside it. But one night, deep beneath the citadel, I heard a whisper. Not the laughter of daemons, not the promise of chaos, something else. A voice I thought I'd never hear again. It spoke just one word: endure. And for the first time since the Emperor fell, I dared to hope. I followed that whisper like a man drowning who thinks he's heard the sound of air. Endure. It wasn't the Emperor's voice as I remembered it. It was weaker, distant, like an echo through 1,000 dying stars. But it was there, For weeks I searched the depths beneath the citadel, moving through forgotten vaults and catacombs that even Horus's armies hadn't fully claimed. Every corridor was alive. Flesh grew on metal. Lights flickered with pulses that matched the beating of diseased hearts. The walls wept pus and blood in rhythm, and I learned to walk quietly, because the walls could hear. Down there, the galaxy felt smaller, compressed into the hum of infection. The warp wasn't above us anymore. It was inside everything. I saw it in the fungus that grew on old data, slates, feeding on corrupted code and whispering sermons in machine tongue. I saw it in the servitors, still performing their programmed rituals, unaware that their masters had been dead for months. Some of them prayed to Horus now, others still to the Emperor, though they mixed the names like they'd forgotten which was which. And one night, I found the chamber. The door was sealed by script older than the Imperium, older even than the Great Crusade. I shouldn't have been able to open it, but when I touched the sigils, they flared gold. Not warp. Gold, not the corrupted light that burned through Horus's citadel, but something pure. The lock disengaged with a sigh, like the tomb itself was exhaling. Inside was a single figure. A custodian, or what was left of one. His armor was broken, his face half gone, skull showing through a crust of dried blood. But his eyes burned. They were not human eyes. They were suns, dimmed but alive. "You heard him too," he said. His voice cracked through vox and lungs at once. I dropped to my knees. I didn't know if I was praying or surrendering. "He's alive." The custodian shook his head slowly. "Alive is not the word. The Emperor was never meant to die as mortals die. His essence, his will, persists, diminished, fading, but not gone." That spark in my chest, that foolish, impossible ember of hope, blazed again. "Then he can return." The custodian's expression didn't change. "Return," he repeated softly. "No, you do not return from death. You become something else." He gestured to the far wall. Carved into it was a mural, ancient, cracked, but still legible in the dim light. It showed a figure of light standing against the stars, hollow shattered, wings made of flame. Beneath him, the galaxy burned. Around him, 4 shadows clawed at the light, pulling it apart, reshaping it. "This is not prophecy," the custodian said. "It is a cycle. The Emperor's victory was never eternal. His death was never final. The galaxy was always meant to rot before it could heal." The words made no sense, and yet they did. Chaos was order's reflection. The other half of the coin. Horus hadn't ended the Emperor's dream. He'd fulfilled its other face. The custodian leaned forward, his remaining hand trembling. "There is still a fragment, a spark. It lingers in the golden throne. Not enough to rule, enough to remember. I guard what remains." Behind him, the floor was marked with a faint glow. The shape of the Aquila, drawn not in paint but in ash and bone dust. He was guarding it like a shrine. "Why tell me?" I asked. "Why me?" "Because you still believe," he said simply. "And belief is fuel. The warp feeds on faith, so use it. Carry what remains of him beyond Terra. Before Horus consumes even this place." I wanted to ask how. I wanted to ask where. But the sound came again before I could. The boots. The whispering armor. The reek of ozone and blood. Horus's chosen were hunting. The custodian stood with effort, lifting a broken spear still etched with the sigils of his order. "Go," he said. "The Warmaster cannot kill what he cannot find." I ran. I didn't look back. The tunnels howled as I fled. Voices whispered from the walls. Some spoke my name. Others spoke names I didn't recognize but somehow knew were mine. The warp remembers what you forget. When I emerged onto the surface, the sky had changed again. The stars were gone. Only the eye remained, a vast, pulsing wound that filled the heavens, stretching from horizon to horizon. Terra was no longer the cradle of mankind. It was the throne of chaos, ships hung above. Not in orbit, but in worship. Colossal vessels of corrupted steel, marked by the sigils of every traitor legion. And among them, a single craft glowed faintly gold beneath the taint. It was smaller, older, familiar. The custodian had bought me time. I reached the craft through rivers of ash and bone, the engines still burning weakly. Inside, the air smelled clean for the first time in months. The console hummed to life at my touch, and the ship's machine spirit, scarred but loyal, recognized my Imperial codes. Coordinates were already locked, not chosen by me, chosen for me. Saturn. The last recorded coordinates of a Mechanicum vault, said to hold something the Emperor had once ordered hidden even from his sons. A weapon, or perhaps a warning. As the ship tore free of Terra's poisoned sky, I looked back one last time. The world that had once been the heart of humanity was now a shrine of ruin. Horus's citadel pulsed with life, like a beating heart spreading infection through the void. I thought of the custodian's words. He cannot kill what he cannot find. Then I set a course for Saturn. Behind me the eye flared brighter, as if it had noticed my escape. And in the static of the ship's vox, the whisper came again, fainter this time, but still there. Endure. The word shook me to my core, not because it offered hope, but because I could hear something else layered beneath it now. A second voice, cold, calm, smiling. Horus. He was listening too. The warp lanes were alive that night. The void outside the hull flickered like a dying star, veins of madness pulsing through the black. Every few seconds, the ship's machine spirit screamed through the cogitators, static bleeding into my ears. The Astronomican was gone. The stars were blind. I was navigating through a dead galaxy guided by ghosts. Saturn appeared as a whisper first, a grey shape caught between reality and the warp. The rings no longer shone. They turned black, eaten by something that shimmered beneath the surface like oil. Debris drifted in silence, shattered Mechanicum hocks, half-melted station fragments, bodies frozen mid-prayer. The vox crackled again. Horus's laughter, faint, carried through the static. You can't outrun divinity, little one. I killed the transmitter and whispered back, not in defiance but in fear. I'm not running. I'm remembering. The Mechanicum outpost, designated an Ankh station, was still there. Its beacon was weak but real, an ancient signal repeating every 9 seconds. Omnissa, forgive what is buried. The docking clamps locked automatically. The airlock opened with a hiss that smelled of rust and incense. Inside, the corridors were half mechanical, half organic. Cables pulsed like veins. Red lights flickered in rhythm with something breathing. The once sacred symbols of the machine god had been rewritten in languages that weren't human. Binary stretched into madness. I moved cautiously. Last pistol drawn, every echo a threat. I'd seen what chaos did to ships. The air carried a strange hum, like hundreds of voices whispering prayers through metal. I found the data core by following the sound. It was singing. A choir of servo skulls hovered above it, their faces stripped to the bone, their vox grills harmonizing in perfect machine precision. The song was code, a litany looping endlessly. He fell, we rise. The flesh remembers. I shut them down one by one. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like blasphemy. The data core came alive at my touch. Lines of code flooded the display, ancient, unstable, locked behind layers of encryption older than the Heresy itself. It took hours to break through. When I did, the screen didn't show schematics or coordinates. It showed a recording. The Emperor's voice, distorted, cracked, barely intelligible. But his, if I fall, it said, mankind must learn to rise without me. You will not find salvation in gods, only chains. Burn my body. Let no man worship my remains. The throne is a prison, not a promise. Then the feed cut to black. I stood there shaking, because if this was true, if this message was real, The Emperor never wanted worship, never wanted this endless cycle of faith and slaughter. His death wasn't the tragedy, his legacy was. Behind me, the servo skulls reactivated, slowly, one by one, but they weren't singing anymore. They were laughing. The lights died. The hum in the metal turned into a heartbeat, slow, thunderous everywhere. I turned my weapon toward the sound, just as something massive stirred behind the core. The walls split open, cables peeling away like muscle, revealing a face made of bronze and flesh fused together. Imago's, or what had once been one. Its eyes burned with green fire. The Omnissiah is dead. It rasped, but he left a seed. I fired. The bolt ricocheted off its faceplate. It didn't react. Instead, one of its mechanical arms reached toward me, dripping fluid that hissed on contact with the deck. He left it here, mortal, beneath the moon's shadow. Why, tell me? I demanded. Because Horus cannot touch it. The thing croaked. It was made for what comes after. The deck shook. The ship's alarms screamed. The station was coming alive. The entire structure, every wire, every pipe, was reacting like a body preparing to expel a disease. I sprinted for the exit. The Magos's voice followed me, echoing through the corridors. Beneath the moon's shadow, the truth waits! Do not endure. Ascend. I made it to the airlock just as the station began to collapse. Fire and warp light flooded the corridors. The ship's clamps disengaged automatically and flung me into space. From orbit, I watched Ananke Station implode in silence. The explosion didn't bloom like a normal blast. It folded inward, like reality itself was being sucked dry. Beneath Saturn's black rings, I saw movement. A shape the size of continents. Something stirring beneath the planet's shadow, its outline barely visible through the storms. The Emperor's seed, or his curse. The Vox came alive one last time before the signal cut. The same voice as before, but this time it wasn't Horus. Come and see. The whisper wasn't from Terra. It wasn't from the warp. It was from below, and I was already falling toward it. The fall wasn't violent. It was graceful. Too graceful for something that should have been suicide. My vessel glided through Saturn's upper atmosphere, the black storms parting ahead as if making room. The void around me wasn't empty anymore. It was watching. I felt it in the hum of the metal, in the pulse of my own blood, in the whisper that guided the controls without my command. The clouds glowed faintly from within, not with lightning. Those were shapes. Vast silhouettes swimming beneath the gaseous surface. Things older than human language. I felt their gravity pull at me like hunger. The Vox crackled again. Static first, then voices layered over each other. Some screaming, some chanting, all speaking in rhythm. Fail, we rise. He fell, we rise. Then one voice separated from the rest. Calm. Familiar. You found it, Horus said. I tried to cut the transmission, but the controls were no longer mine. You think you were the first to seek the corpse's secrets. We've all heard the whisper. Even I. Especially I. The ship broke through the final layer of atmosphere. Beneath the clouds there was land, or something pretending to be land. A surface made of molten glass and fossilized bone, stretching endlessly in all directions. In the center of it stood a monolith, a perfect obsidian tower that reached from ground to sky, pulsing faintly with golden veins. The Emperor's seed. I whispered. The ship set itself down without my input. The airlock hissed open. The heat was unbearable, yet the ground was cold. My boots left no imprint. The monolith loomed higher than any spire on Terra had ever dared. The closer I walked, the louder the whispers grew. Familiar and strange all at once, like 1,000 human prayers spoken backward. When I touched the surface, it didn't feel like scone. It felt like skin, warm, alive. It pulsed once beneath my palm and I saw everything. The galaxy burning. Not metaphorical fire, real fire, licking across systems as warp storms tore through the void. Planets falling not to invasion, but to transformation. Entire populations turning into extensions of daemons. Cities breathing, oceans rotting into sentient filth. The Eye of Terror wasn't a region anymore. It was everywhere, and through it all, Horus ruled, not as a god, as a prophet of want. He sat upon a throne of corpses built on what had once been the Imperial palace, his eyes burning with borrowed light. Around him, the Primarchs knelt, those who had once called him brother now bound to his will. Mortarion, reeking of disease and divinity. Lorga, reciting scriptures written in blood. Fulgrim, beauty rotted into parody. Angron, silent at last, his rage burned out and replaced with something worse. Devotion. Horus had won, and in winning he doomed himself. I saw it clearly. The gods didn't reward victory, they consumed it. Chaos fed on triumph and turned it into rot. Horus wasn't their champion anymore, he was their puppet, the Warmaster of nothing. The vision shifted, the monolith opened. Inside I saw light, real light, pure cold white. It burned through the colorless fog like a scalpel through flesh. In the center stood a figure, golden armor cracked and blackened, flesh torn but glowing faintly from within. The Emperor, not alive, not dead, a husk containing something vast and dreaming. His eyes opened, not with warmth, but with understanding. He saw me, and I understood then why he'd whispered, why he'd called me here. He wasn't asking for help, he was testing me, because I wasn't alone. Horus descended from the clouds like a storm given shape, his armor bleeding light, his face carved by war and madness. I told you, he said, you can't outrun divinity. He looked at the monolith, and for the first time I saw hesitation, fear maybe, recognition. It's his final weapon, Horus said quietly, his last insult. He knew he couldn't win, so he planted this seed. Not of power, of doubt. It spreads through the warp like infection. It makes gods question themselves. He turned to me, and he chose you to protect it. A mortal, a soldier of ashes. Pathetic. He raised his weapon, a blade burning with shifting light, and I raised mine, though I knew it meant nothing. The monolith pulsed again. Once, twice. The ground beneath us trembled, and then the voice came, not from above, not from the warp, but from within. Both of you, it said, are my sons. The Horus froze. I couldn't breathe. The voice was the Emperor's, but not as I remembered. This was older, deeper, less human. Kill me and you free me. Spare me and you damn yourselves. The monolith cracked. Light poured out like blood from a wound. Horus screamed, covering his eyes as the warp recoiled. I saw shapes within the light. Memories, futures, possibilities. Terror burning again. The galaxy healed. The galaxy dying. Infinite loops of failure and rebirth. I understood then, this wasn't history. It was recursion. The Emperor dies. Chaos rises. Humanity suffers. The cycle repeats. But something new was happening. The light wasn't fading. It was spreading into me. And Horus saw it too. His face twisted. Not in rage, but terror. No, he said. Not again. The ground split open. The monolith shattered. The light consumed everything, and I was falling. Not through space, through time, through memory, through everything the galaxy had ever been or would be. Somewhere far above, or maybe below, I heard the Emperor's voice one last time. You wanted salvation, child. Now you'll carry it. The light turned red. The stars screamed, the galaxy began again. And I realized with horror what the seed truly was. Not a weapon, not hope, a restart, the end of one Imperium, the birth of another, and I was the conduit. When the light took me, I thought I was dying. Then I realized death had already happened. This was something worse, or maybe something better. There's no language for it. Imagine feeling your atoms rewritten while your mind stays awake to watch. Every thought I'd ever had was peeled apart and measured. as if something vast was deciding which parts to keep. When I opened my eyes, the world was silent. The monolith was gone. Saturn was gone. Space itself was wrong. Stars burned in shapes I didn't recognize. Their constellations twisted into patterns that felt deliberate, like writing meant for something that wasn't human. I wasn't in my time anymore. Maybe not even in my reality. The ship was gone too. I stood on a plain of metal dust, black as the void, stretching endlessly beneath a pale green sky. No sun, no planets, only sound, a low, constant thrum like the heartbeat of a machine the size of a galaxy. And then the voice came again. Not the Emperor's, not Horus's, something in between. You have carried my spark. The air vibrated with it. My skin cracked under the sound, blood boiling where it touched the light. You have seen what comes after order. You have seen what becomes of victory. Tell me, do you still believe in man? I tried to speak, but the words died in my throat. The ground rippled like water, and from it rose figures, thousands of them. Humans, or at least what looked like humans, each one a reflection of me. Some wore Imperial uniforms. Some wore armor I didn't recognize. Some had no faces at all, only shifting light. They moved in unison, their mouths opening together to speak the same phrase. Endure. I screamed for silence. They didn't stop. Their voices layered, multiplied, grew until the sky trembled. Then the horizon cracked open. A fleet emerged, massive ships shaped like cathedrals, their hulls dripping molten gold. They weren't Imperial. They weren't chaos. They were something new. Their banners bore the same sigil I'd seen burned into my own skin after touching the monolith, a broken aquila, one wing golden, one blackened. The largest ship opened its Vox channel, and a voice spoke through the static, calm, cold, too familiar. Lieutenant Corvus Hale. It was my own voice. You are the first, it said. The Imperium that never was begins with you. The fleet moved across the sky like a living storm. Warp energy trailed behind them, not corrupted, not holy, just balanced, controlled. They weren't bound to chaos, but neither were they untouched by it. It was as if humanity had learned to wield the warp instead of fear it. That's when I understood the truth of the Emperor's seed. It wasn't meant to bring him back. It was meant to change us, to evolve mankind past him. I fell to my knees as the fleet's shadow passed overhead. The voice in my head kept speaking, my own voice, calm and ancient. We learned, we adapted, we built our new. The gods still hunger, but now we feed them slowly with purpose, balance, not worship. I should have felt joy, triumph, but all I felt was dread, because I knew what it meant. The cycle hadn't ended, it had matured. Humanity wasn't free from chaos. We'd just learned to live with it, to negotiate with it. Something touched my shoulder. I turned. A figure stood there, wrapped in robes the color of old parchment, its face hidden beneath a hood. When it spoke, its voice sounded like mine. This is the future you created when you refused to die. I looked around. The dust, the sky, the endless hum. All of it pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Where am I? I asked. In between, it said. The garden that isn't Nurgle's. The forge that isn't Mars. The throne that isn't his. You are the seed's guardian now. You are memory. You are the error in the code. I staggered back. Then why me? The hooded figure lifted its head. Beneath the cowl was not a face, but a mirror. My reflection stared back at me, eyes hollow, mouth smiling faintly. Because you endured. Lightning split the sky. From the fissures fell chains, massive, luminous, embedding themselves into the ground. The hum became a scream. The ships in the sky began to turn, their golden hulls warping, cracking, revealing the same corruption that had once consumed Horus's empire. The balance was already breaking, the cycle restarting. The figure raised a hand, and the world began to disintegrate into symbols and dust. Every empire falls. It said, "Even this one. Even the ones you have yet to imagine." I reached for it, desperate. "Then tell me what I'm supposed to do." It smiled. My smile. "The same thing you've always done." The ground vanished beneath my feet. Endure. I fell again, through light, through darkness, through history unraveling and knitting itself anew. Terra, Horus, the Emperor, the Seed. Over and over. Only this time, I wasn't watching, I was inside it. And when I opened my eyes, I was back in the trenches. The sky was burning. The palace still stood. Horus hadn't reached the throne yet. The cycle had begun again. But this time I remembered. The first thing I heard was the screaming. Not human, not daemon. Something caught in between. When my vision returned, I was back in the ruins. The smell of ozone, blood, and burning promethium clawing at my lungs. The palace still stood, but it looked older, wrong, as though millennia had already passed within seconds. Statues cracked and repaired themselves in the same breath. Vox towers flickered between imperial prayers and guttural, warp-fed laughter. And the sky, Emperor preserve me. The sky was tearing. Great wounds of red light split the firmament, showing the warp pressing against reality like a sea against cracked glass. I could see faces in it, vast and mournful, whispering words I shouldn't have understood but did. Words that weren't language but memory. Everything was repeating, but not exactly. This wasn't the siege I remembered from my histories or nightmares. This was a distortion, a version rewritten by something that remembered how it ended and wanted to try again. The Imperial lines held the gate, but their banners weren't the Aquila. The symbol was that same broken one, gold and black, balance and rot. The soldiers wore the colors of the Astra Militarum, but their eyes burned faintly green, and every breath they took released a trace of mist that drifted toward the clouds. One of them turned to me. His armor was scorched, his Vox grill cracked. "Lieutenant," he said as though recognizing me. "Orders." My throat closed. "What legion are you?" He tilted his head, as if the question was nonsense. "The Enduring." Then I saw the truth. These weren't guardsmen. They were echoes of humanity's future, the same hybrid soldiers I'd seen in that endless metallic plain, still fighting a war that should have ended 10,000 years ago. The sound of bolters echoed from beyond the gate. Horus's forces, twisted remnants of the lunar wolves, poured through the breach in the outer wall, banners soaked in blood, chanting the Warmaster's name in voices that fractured the air. Daemons crawled through the cracks in reality behind them, pulled forward by worship and hate, and between the two sides the air shimmered. A third army emerged, figures draped in bronze light and shadow. Some bore Imperial iconography twisted into new sigils, others wore chaos runes scarred, nearly cleaned. The fleet I'd seen in the void, the new Imperium, had arrived. Their leader walked forward, hood drawn low, cloak tattered and alive with static. I knew that gate before I saw his face, the same one that had spoken to me through the mirror, the same voice that said I was the first. Me. I was watching myself lead them. He, or I, stood at the heart of the battlefield and raised a gauntleted hand. The bolter fire slowed. The daemons froze mid-lunge. The air turned to glass. "This cycle ends now," my other self said, voice amplified until it drowned out the warp's howls. "The gods have feasted long enough." Horus stepped through the fire like a god made of nightmares. His armor shone with the favor of four powers, his eyes twin stars of corruption. "You presume to defy us." His voice shook the stone foundations of terror. "You presume to speak in the corpse's name." My reflection didn't flinch. "Not his name," he said. "Ours." Then the warp screamed. A fissure tore open between them, and through it poured a light unlike anything I'd seen before. Not gold, not red, but something deeper. It devoured color, memory, and time. The daemons shrieked as it touched them. Horus roared in fury and charged. My other self met him head-on. When they clashed, reality shattered. The blast threw me backward through the ruins, through time, through memory. I saw every version of Terra, before the siege, after it, during the Emperor's reign, after his death. The planet changed with every heartbeat. Oceans boiled, cities burned, then rebuilt, then burned again. The sky cracked and healed and cracked once more. I crawled across the rubble, trying to reach them, but my body wasn't fully solid. My hand passed through stone. My heartbeat echoed like thunder, and in that storm of light and ruin, I saw something move behind Horus. A shadow vast and winged, faceless, but crowned in fire. The Emperor, but not as he had been. This was no man on a throne. This was the consciousness I'd touched inside the monolith, reborn, not in flesh, but in equilibrium. Chaos and order merged into one impossible being. He spoke one word, and every gun fell silent. Horus. The Warmaster hesitated. The confidence faltered. For the first time, the corruption seemed to fear. And in that single heartbeat of hesitation, I felt something take hold of me again. The pull. The same gravity that had dragged me into the void before. The world folded inward. I wasn't sure if I was being saved or erased. Either way, I was falling again. But this time, I could feel 1,000 eyes watching, waiting to see what would emerge from the next cycle. When the fall ended, it wasn't darkness that took me. It was silence. The kind of silence that hums, too complete to be natural. My body was whole. But the air around me trembled, as if reality was trying to remember its shape. I stood on what used to be Terra, or something wearing its skin. The sky was a bruised wound, pulsing with faint light, and the ground breathed like flesh beneath my boots. Everywhere I looked, there were echoes, not people, reflections. Soldiers frozen mid-charge, banners stiff in invisible wind, fragments of battles overlapping in time. The siege had never ended. It was still happening, endlessly, over and over, every victory and defeat folding into each other like layers of rot. And above it all, at the heart of the broken sky, hung Horus's palace, no longer a fortress, but a living organism. Its towers were ribs, its gates teeth, its battlements wrapped in veins that pulsed with warp energy. The Warmaster's citadel stretched into the heavens, feeding on terror itself. That's when I realized what had happened. Horus hadn't just won. He'd anchored himself to the planet, turned it into a throne of meat and stone, fusing the material world with the warp. Terra wasn't a world anymore. It was his body, his monument, his weapon. The air shifted, and a voice reached me, low, distorted, and full of terrible calm. You survived again. The voice wasn't Horus's. It was mine. I turned and saw myself standing among the shadows, the same fractured doppelganger that had haunted me since the monolith. But this time, his armor was different, blacker, heavier, marked with runes that shimmered like oil. His eyes burned faintly with gold and sickly green light. Why do you keep running? He asked. You've seen the truth 12 times, and still you resist it. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The ground stretched endlessly, the same in every direction. You're not me. He smiled. Not anymore. I'm what you become when you stop pretending that the Emperor's corpse is worth dying for. Behind him, the battlefield trembled. A ripple of distortion tore through the air, and the horizon opened like a wound. Daemon engines crawled across the sky, dragging chains of flame. Above them floated the ghost of the Astronomican, no longer a beacon of light, but an eye, vast and lidless, watching. Do you know what this is? He said, gesturing to the world around us. This is what happens when chaos wins, and then wins again. This is the Imperium that never was. I shook my head. No, this isn't victory, it's infection. He laughed, a raw, broken sound. There's no difference anymore. Infection is life. The galaxy breathes the warp now. The gods no longer need worshippers. They have reality. Lightning flared, and I saw his armor split open down the center. Beneath it, where flesh should have been, was the warp itself, shifting, alive, whispering. "We are their reflection," he said softly. "We are what the Emperor could never understand. That the warp doesn't just destroy, it evolves. It adapts. It teaches." I raised my weapon, though I didn't remember picking it up. "And what are you teaching?" "Endurance," he said. "You were the first human to survive the end of everything. Don't you see? That's why you keep coming back. You are the memory of mankind, the echo that refuses to die." The seed he left behind. He stepped closer. I could feel heat radiating from him, like standing near a reactor breach. "But the seed can't grow in the old soil," he continued. "You must plant it here, in Horus's garden." I aimed for his head. "I'm not part of your cycle." He smiled wider. "You already are." The gun fired. The shot hit him square in the chest, and for an instant there was light, pure, white, blinding. Then his body dissolved into smoke, curling upward into the dark sky. The ground beneath me split open, and a sound like breathing filled the world. From the fissures rose hands, human hands, thousands of them, reaching from the soil, blackened, blistered, grasping. Each one pulled at my armor, at my skin, whispering in dozens of voices. "Endure, endure, endure," I screamed. The word echoed back at me, not from the world, but from inside my skull. The same whisper that had haunted me since the first infection, since Verdantis, since the garden. I wasn't escaping the cycle. I was the cycle. The ground convulsed, and the hands dragged me down. The air turned to liquid, thick and burning. I tried to fight, but every movement only pulled me deeper. I could feel my lungs filling with the world itself, feel the dirt press against my teeth. And as the last of the sky vanished above me, I saw it, etched into the clouds like a scar, carved into the face of eternity, a broken aquila, one wing gold, one wing black, the same mark burned on my skin. The galaxy wasn't split between Chaos and the Imperium anymore. It was both. One body, two hearts, decaying in rhythm. And somewhere beneath it all, something vast was still breathing. There's no horizon anymore. Just movement, slow, endless, like the galaxy itself is trying to exhale after millennia of screaming. When I surface again, it's not into air, but into memory. Not mine, ours, humanity's, replayed in colors and sounds that don't belong to the material world. The stars look wrong. They flicker like dying neurons. Each one is a thought, a decision, a prayer that's been warped into something unrecognizable. The Astronomican's eye still hangs there, pulsing faintly, but it no longer guides ships. It watches, waiting, judging, feeding. I walk, or maybe drift. The ground beneath me is glassy, transparent. Beneath it, entire planets twist and burn in silence. I can see hive worlds melting under seas of fire, agri worlds sprouting fungal forests of screaming wheat, forge worlds whose machinery is fused with flesh and ritual. It's a galaxy-sized wound, and every scar hums with life. Then I hear the hymns. They're not imperial, not chaotic. Something in between. Vast choirs of warped throats singing a harmony that bridges pain and peace. The words are the same everywhere I go: endure, adapt, become. I follow the sound until I find them. A congregation of the half-born. Former humans, their bodies sculpted by something older than chaos and colder than the Emperor. Their bones are wrapped in strands of metallic fungus, their eyes sealed by membranes of translucent skin that pulse with inner light. They kneel in concentric circles around a great wound in the ground, where molten blood and starlight mix like mercury. A priest stands at the center, or what passes for one. Its robes are stitched from flayed servo skulls. Its voice is an echo that vibrates inside my chest. "Welcome, bearer of the seed," it says. We have awaited your arrival. I can't move. I can barely breathe. The priest gestures, and the wound begins to close, the light dimming until only the whisper of its energy remains. Do you know what this place is? It asks. I shake my head. This is Terra, the real one, beneath the ruins, beneath the rot, the first world remade by the last breath of the Emperor. It's been growing ever since he fell. The words hit like impact shock. I look down and see veins of light running through the ground. Gold at first, then darkening into green, then black. It's a network, a living, thinking system spreading across the crust of the world. He didn't die. The priest continues. He changed. His corpse fed the planet, his soul fused with the warp, and from their union life returned. Not his Imperium, not Horus's dominion, something new, something balanced. I whisper, that's impossible. The priest's mouth stretches into a smile that's almost kind. Impossible. Child, you've walked through eternity's rot. You've watched the galaxy digest itself, and still exists to tell the tale. You think impossible means anything now. The congregation begins to chant softly, the air thickening with spores that shimmer like stars. My body reacts before my mind does, breathing them in, recognizing them as something familiar. The same scent from the garden on Vedantis. Sweet, wet decay, I feel it then. A pulse deep in the ground, slow, measured. It matches the rhythm of my heart. Do you feel him? The priest asks. He is not gone. He is in all of us, in the soil, in the air, in the blood of the blessed. Horus thought he could kill a god. He only changed the form of godhood. The air ripples. The priest steps closer, its eyes open, and there's nothing inside them but void. You are what he left behind, it says. A fragment that remembers what it means to be human. That's why you returned. That's why the cycle can't end until you understand what he became. I want to speak, to demand an answer, but the words dissolve in my mouth. The spores taste like iron and rain. The chanting grows louder. The priest raises its hands, and the ground splits open again. Not a wound this time, but a mouth vast and patient. Inside it light churns. Go to him, the priest says. See what the Emperor's mercy looks like now. The hands of the congregation rise to lift me. They're gentle, reverent. The spores crawl across my skin, glowing faintly where they touch. My heartbeat syncs with the world's. The pulse grows louder until I realize it's no longer external. It's mine. The ground opens fully. I fall, swallowed whole. As I sink into the light, I hear the priest's voice fading behind me. The Warmaster ruled for 10,000 years. The Emperor rules still, but the line between them was always thinner than anyone dared admit. The fall feels endless. But ahead, in the brightness, I see a shape forming, colossal, radiant, and half-rotted. A face that's both divine and ruined. Eyes that know me, and a voice that says softly, almost lovingly, "Welcome home, my child." The light swallows me whole, but it isn't just light. It's warmth. It's weight. It's the pressure of a dying star's heart wrapping around me like a shroud. My body dissolves, not in pain but in memory. Skin becoming moments, bone becoming whispers, blood turning into all the prayers I ever muttered into the dark of the trenches. I don't fall anymore. I float. Shapes emerge from the glow. Not physical, not truly, but enough for my mind to interpret. Titans of flesh and iron kneeling at the edges of an impossible throne room. Daemon primarchs carved in half light and shadow, their wings folded like funeral banners. And at the center, suspended between matter and nightmare, sits a figure so immense the scale breaks my sense of self. It isn't the Emperor I was taught to worship, the golden giant hallowed in burning wings. It isn't Horus either, not the triumphant Warmaster wreathed in ruin. It's something made from both, a carcass of light and shadow, a god sewn together from its own contradictions. Its skin is cracked marble veined with black fire. Its crown is a nest of bone and twisted ocular wings. Its eyes are voids that burn with the color of dying suns. And it smiles, "My child," it says, and its voice shakes the stars. "You carried my seed across the rot of the galaxy. You've seen what I became. You've seen what we became." The sound of it bends the air into waves. It isn't a voice meant for mortal ears, but my body, whatever's left of it, understands. Memories flood me, Horus striking the Emperor, the golden throne collapsing, the warp boiling into real space. Not just visions but sensations, the shock, the pain, the moment when both were annihilated and reborn into this amalgam of divinity and decay. "You were told I died," the thing says. "You were told Horus ruled lies, half-truths. We both died. We both became this. The Imperium never was. The Chaos Galaxy never was. Only the cycle remains." Its hand rises, larger than continents, the flesh riddled with constellations of glowing sores. It points at me, and the air between us splits, showing the galaxy as it now is. Every world infected, every ship adrift in a tide of living warp, not ruled by chaos, not ruled by man, something else, something waiting. I feel my mind straining. "Why me?" I whisper. My voice sounds like a child's, cracked and small. "You are the witness," it replies. "The last who remembers what was, the first to tell what is. You will carry my word back to the unblessed. Not as a soldier, as a seed. 1,000 tendrils of light uncoil from its throne, reaching toward me. They brush my skin, if I still have skin, and sink in, leaving trails of burning cold that feel like destiny. I understand then. I won't return as myself. I'll return as a vector. The story I tell will be a plague of its own. Every word I speak will plant the truth in another mind, and the truth will spread until the galaxy stops clinging to the illusion of the Imperium, of chaos, of victory, of defeat." The smile widens. "Go now," it says. "Go back. Carry the Imperium. That never was to those who still dream of it. Give them the choice you were denied. Tell them what it means when gods die and do not stay dead." The throne room fades. The light collapses inward. For an instant I see terror as it once was. The Imperial palace shining like a spear of gold, banners of the Ocula snapping in clean wind. Then it blinks out, replaced by a garden of black vines, thorned and luminous, stretching between stars. The throne becomes soil. The soil becomes breath. I wake up on a battlefield of ash. My hands are mine again, but wrong, mottled with green veins. Fingers trembling with the power of something vast moving beneath my skin. Above me, the sky is neither night nor day, but a sheet of shifting colors, warp and real space braided into one endless shroud. In the distance, cities burn and sing at the same time. I stand, I know what I am now. Not a soldier, not a survivor, not even a heretic. I am a messenger, the last memory of a dead Imperium. The first prophet of the Imperium that never was. And somewhere behind me, in the warp, garden that stretches across the stars, the voice still murmurs, "Go, tell them, let them choose. The galaxy is already ours. All that's left is to make them understand." I start walking, and the ground under my feet hums the rhythm of a heartbeat older than humanity itself. If you can hear my words, if they reach you through the ruins of your faith, know this: the Emperor you worship is gone. Horus you fear is gone. What remains is the truth you've never been allowed to see. You are already changing. You are already rotting. You are already loved. Stop fighting. Start listening. The Imperium that never was is here. The garden is waiting. Grandfather is waiting. We are waiting. Will you join us, or cling to the corpse of a dream?